And it's straight down, past the hotel registration.
And back in
Oh, you know where it is.
Oh, look, if you want to be governor of this state, you have to be governor of all the people.
Andy? Mick. How you doing? Andy, this is Peter Smith.
Hi, Peter.
This is Andy from... Hello.
Good. Good.
Hi, Peter. Doug Schwan.
Good to see
Arlington.
you. Yes, sir.
How's the thing going?
If I wanted an easy summer, I'd run for re-election. I need your help.
Okay, do what I can. Thank you.
We are being told that we have to choose between whether working people will be able to work, whether there will be an economy in this state, whether people will be able to afford to live here, who have to work for a living, and whether or not we can have the kind of environment.
We got a person on the grounds right now. Jeff may be on the grounds. We have one person handing out buttons on the grounds, getting petition signatures.
Great.
This is a very scattered fair.
I know.
Hi, Bernie. How are you? Good. Good.
It gets a little tiring now and then. We're hanging in there. How you doing?
Maybe.
So here, you want another button?
You're socialist, aren't you?
Yep.
We'll be voting for you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
How'd you like one of these?
Good. All right. Thank you, Bernie.
You
Give
want
the kids one,
Okay.
yeah?
Okay. Good.
Thanks, Bernie.
Oops. Ready to go. The mayor of Burlington. Where are you guys from?
Connecticut.
Sorry.
That's all right.
We're from Rutland.
There you go. Governor. Sanders. How are you?
Pretty good.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Just do the button.
First couple. Sashay down center. And back.
The bill number is 8621.
Probably wouldn't be the same bill now. It'd be a different legislature, yeah.
That's the last number that was on it.
And this is wrong. I can afford it, but there are people that have to go pay $3.
So you'd appreciate meeting Letty Wilder, who was a state representative from Orange County in the 30s.
Were you really? Hey,
Enjoyed it a great deal, too.
isn't that wonderful? You must have been one of the first women then.
I think so.
Yeah.
Do you remember the woman from Orange? She was the first woman legislator.
I've forgotten her name right now.
Edna Beard.
Yes, I'm sure.
Did you remember her?
Oh, yes.
Has anybody ever asked?
Governor Madeleine Kunin, Democrat of Vermont, why are you running for re-election?
I'm running for re-election basically to answer the question whether Vermont is moving in the right direction. Since I've been governor for about 18 months, we've retired the deficit, we've improved funding for education, and we've enacted some very strong environmental legislation. I feel that the job has been started, that we are going in the right direction, and I'd like to continue on that track.
How many terms will it take you to complete the agenda that you've set for yourself?
As you know, one of the unique things about Vermont, or the special things about Vermont, is one of the few states that just has a 2-year term. Certainly another term, to have 4 years to carry forward some of these initiatives, I think is essential.
Lieutenant Governor Peter Smith, Republican, running for governor. Why are you running?
Well, Carl, I think it would be safe to say if I'd wanted an easy race, I would have run for re-election this summer, because really both of these people are already legends in their own time. But for me, this isn't a race about legends, it's a race about the future of the state of Vermont. And you know what, I think when many people who are watching this show tonight think about Vermont, they think of a white farmhouse or a little town or a dirt road or a gushing stream, and they think of this beautiful, pristine place, but there's a family in that farmhouse, and that's a family that is caught between high taxes and one of the lowest incomes in the United States of America, amongst the highest taxes in the United States of America, and I'm running for that family. I'm running to help them get out of a bind, because there's anxiety in that farmhouse, and we simply can't buy our way out of the problems that we face. We're going to have to think our way out of those problems, and we're going to have to work our way out of those problems.
Mayor Bernard Sanders, Independent, Mayor of Burlington, why are you running for governor?
Well, I'm running for governor because I think it's time to stop the Tweedledee, Tweedledum politics of the Democratic and Republican Party. In the city of Burlington, we've done something that has not been done in the United States of America. That is, we've taken on the Democrats, we've taken on the Republicans, and we've beaten them. We've stood up for working people and poor people. We've said that there's something immoral and wrong about a society in which 1/2 of the population owns over 1/3 of the wealth, where the rich dominate the political scene. where working people are earning less today in terms of real wages than they earned 10 years ago. I'm running for governor because I think the issue of nuclear power is an important issue, and I think finally we've got to decide whether or not we want to continue nuclear power in the state of Vermont or we want to get rid of it. And I'm running for governor because I think the state of Vermont should take a leadership role in this nation in speaking out against the absurd and virtually insane priorities of the Reagan administration, which is spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars on the military and cutting back funding for low-income people, for working people, for the elderly and the poor. We need leadership in the state of Vermont. We're not getting it today, and that's why I'm running for governor.
You've gotten a lot of attention nationally as America's the socialist mayor of Burlington, America's socialist mayor. Are you a socialist?
Yes.
Why are you running as an independent?
Well, the same reason that Mrs. Kunin and Mr. Smith are parts of the capitalist economic system. They're not running as capitalists, they're running as Democrats and Republicans. Socialism to me means democracy with a small d. I am not affiliated with a political party. I am an independent who happens to be a socialist. I am outraged about the system that we're living in when you have corporations and millionaires and billionaires dominating the entire society. And as a socialist, I want to see a radical redistribution of wealth and power in this country so the average working person, the average farmer, the average woman has a fair shake. We're not getting that. Socialism, to me, is a philosophy, but I'm not affiliated with any particular socialist party.
Lieutenant Governor Peter Smith, Republican, what are the major issues in your campaign? Specifically outline them for us.
I think the point is that I disagree fundamentally with both of my opponents in terms of the tone and the direction of state government. Their course is for more spending, more government, more employees, and more regulations. Really, let's think about the family in the farmhouse again. You know, that family and the other working people in this state have just lost a $16 to $17 million cut in their state personal income tax because of the spending record of this administration. In the last 2 years, we've increased spending $63 million, and that means government has grown faster than the paycheck of the average Vermonter. Phone rates have gone up $3.5 million more than they needed to, and that's not the fault of the phone company. It's the fault of an administration, the current one, that intervened at a time in the process when they shouldn't have. My program, property tax relief for the people of this state, but let's do it by getting to the core of the problem. State mandates without state funding that drive the property tax up, have been driving it up, and more mandates in the wings that will drive it up even further. Limiting spending so that, in fact, people's paycheck increases faster than the rate of spending in state government. Because when it's the other way around, the working men and women of this state, all the people of this state, the business climate of this state, all lose those kinds of programs. That's why I'm running.
Has Governor Kunin done a poor job of running the state for the last 2 years, Lieutenant Governor?
I think rather than characterizing or falling into the who struck John, or in this case, who struck Madeleine, let me tell you that the consequences are really what matter. I'm going to leave it to other people to decide whether or not she's done a good job or a bad job. But we got 1,000 fewer manufacturing jobs in this state than we did a year ago. We're at a 5-year low in the Vermont Industrial Development Authority in terms of new applications for grants. And I got to tell you that when you look at the tax rate and you look at the spending is up 10%, a little less than that this year, and the revenue rate's increasing by 3.5%. There's trouble there, and the consequences are who's going to pay? And you know what? This is a middle-income, lower middle-income state. The people are going to pay.
Governor Madeleine Kunin, Democrat running for re-election. What are the major issues? Outline them for us as far as your campaign is concerned.
Well, I'd like to just correct a few statements that have been made. In fact, the consequences are very important, and let me tell you about some of those consequences. First of all, Vermont's per capita income grew the second highest of any state in the nation in the last year. In the first quarter of 1986, we were the third highest. So Vermont's income is going up. Our unemployment rate, 3.9%, is the lowest it's been in years since people have been calculating it. We've added 8,800 new jobs in the last year. Every single statistic says that this state is on a roll, that this state is doing very well. Doesn't mean it's perfect for everybody, but it does mean we're moving in the right direction. We retired a deficit. I'm the only governor in this country that started out with the highest deficit of any state, 9% of our general fund. That's what I inherited from a Republican administration. Today, we have an $8.9 million surplus. Those are results. These two gentlemen can talk about what they would do. He can talk about a theoretical family in a farmhouse. We all love that family in the farmhouse. But what we have done is increase their earning power, and that is important for the future of Vermonters. Yes, we've got more to do. We are still below the national average in per capita income. But the important point is we are moving fast, and we've made the right investments in that spending in education to improve the quality of life and the quality of jobs that people can have in the state. That's an issue.
Good evening. C-SPAN is live from Montpelier, Vermont. We're here in the second floor of the State Capitol building, the governor's reception room. We've been here camped out for about 4 days trying to give you around the country or in Vermont a look at politics in this state. What are some of the major issues and the candidates? This evening we're going to be looking specifically at the race for governor, and we have with us three of the major candidates for governor. To my left, already been introduced, Governor Madeleine Kunin, Democrat, running for re-election. Next to her, Lieutenant Governor Peter Smith, Republican candidate. And finally, Mayor Bernard Sanders, Mayor of Burlington, running as an independent. In just a few moments, we're going to be opening up the phone lines, and we're going to try to take as many calls as we possibly can. Each of the candidates will have one chance to respond to each of your questions, but if you're a regular C-SPAN viewer, you know we put a heavy emphasis on involving you. So if you have a question or a comment, we'd like to hear from you. We'd like to get your opinion or hear your questions. There will be one special line for those of you living within the state of Vermont, and those of you watching around the country will be able to use that second line, and we'll start taking phone calls in just a few moments. This country has just seen a major debate over the issue of tax reform, and we're very likely about to see it passed by Congress. The other day in the newspaper, Mayor Sanders, you said that you have some new idea of a tax system for this state specifically. You had made it clear in the article, at least that I read, that you were about 2 weeks away from announcing that. Can you tell us anything about that? If you were elected, how would you change the tax
Governor
system?
Kunin talks about taxes from a statewide point of view from here in Montpelier, but what she's missing is a very important point, is that in the last year in the state of Vermont, property taxes have zoomed up. What we have today in the state of Vermont is a property tax crisis. Property taxes went up by $28 million. The state of Vermont, this state, is far more dependent upon the property tax than almost any other state in the union. We are not adequately funding education. We're far below what we should be funding education compared to the national average. What we need right now in the state of Vermont is major tax reform, and the tax reform can and must be brought about by decoupling Vermont's personal and corporate income tax from the federal income tax system. Governor Kunin correctly talks about the deficit that existed in the state of Vermont, and that's right. We have lost several $100 million in revenue to the state of Vermont, which has caused our deficit because the legislature and the governors have not had the courage to say, let's make tax policy here in the state of Vermont. Let's not give tax breaks to the wealthy and the corporations that they get on the federal level and have that translated into tax breaks for the rich and the corporations here in the state of Vermont. And we've lost in the last 5 years several $100 million in revenue, and lo and behold, we've had a deficit. To the best of my knowledge, neither one of my opponents has the guts to say, let's decouple, let's ask the wealthy people in this state, the corporations, to start paying their fair share. Let's take the burden of taxation off of the homeowner, off of the farmer, through increased property taxes.
Governor Kunin, taxes, major issue, and should we see a major change in Vermont?
Well, I think Mayor Sanders' speech would have been fine before the federal tax law was in a committee of conference, not quite passed yet, but actually Vermonters are going to benefit enormously, more than people from the rest of the country. Because of our income distribution, we have more Vermonters at the middle and lower income scale and fewer at the very top. We're going to get an average of a 10% tax cut for Vermonters, and about 20% of our taxpayers will be taken off the tax rolls entirely. For the short term, that is a very good thing that we are coupled to the federal income tax. For the long term, I would like to see what exactly the impact is on middle-income Vermont taxpayers.
Lieutenant Governor Smith, any changes in taxes if you were elected?
Well, I think the interesting thing is that in this particular case, we don't know what the long term is. And I got to tell you, I'm opposed to decoupling. B flat. The governor says that income growth has gone up 7%, and that's third in the country. But Vermont started at 46th or 47th, and we all know that a percentage growth on a low base can be disproportionate. Now look, what happened is that when we retired the deficit, and I was here when we put that plan together, there was another part to that plan, and it was to limit spending to 6%, so that in case we raised more money than we anticipated, it wouldn't go into an inflated budget. But we didn't do that. And we went out at 9% and 9%, and what has happened now is that the working people of this state, because that's who the people in Vermont are, $10,000 to $25,000 a year. That's who they are. They've lost the benefit of the pass-through that the piggyback would have given them, and they've lost it because we didn't follow the whole deficit reduction plan. Now, I'll tell you, I think it's going to be a major issue in this campaign, and my answer to taxes is to put a lid on spending and get more and get better, to think our way, work our way out of the problems we've got and reform our systems from the inside out and from the bottom up, rather than just spending more money and adding on.
We're going to go to the phones. Each of you had a chance to talk about taxes.
Not another word on taxes,
We're
maybe?
going to go to the phones. I'm sure there will be more questions on taxes since it affects absolutely everybody. First call is from Burlington. Want to remind you that if you live in Vermont, one special number for you and the other number for those of you watching around the country. If you have a question or a comment, please feel free to give us a call. Let's take the first call of the hour from Burlington. You're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Hello. Like everybody in the United States, I was aghast at what happened in Chernobyl with the nuclear disaster. I'd like to ask the three candidates. We have in Vermont a nuclear facility, Vermont Yankee, which has a containment structure almost exactly like the one in Chernobyl. What do you propose to do about Vermont Yankee and the possibility of catastrophe there? And specifically, how long do you think it should continue to operate? Right now, it's proposed to operate for another 20 years. Do you favor shutting it down, and how long do you propose to let it operate?
Okay, Burlington, thanks for the call. Mayor Bernard Sanders, why don't you start?
Okay, that's a very, very important question. And I think, there are honest people on both sides of the issue, and it's a complicated issue. I think ultimately one has to make a decision. And the decision is whether one has enough confidence in nuclear power to say that we want nuclear power in Vernon to continue for another 20 years, or whether we say it just ain't worth the risk. I'm not proposing or telling anybody that the Yankee nuclear power plant is going to blow up tomorrow. It's not. But I think ultimately, after a lot of thinking, and I have to say that I have not been one of the great anti-nuclear activists in the state of Vermont, but I think after a lot of thinking, and I think the Chernobyl incident made me think a little bit more about it, that I think it is time to say loudly and clearly, let's shut down Yankee. It is not worth the risk. But let's not shut it down tomorrow, because if you shut it down tomorrow, electric rates would go up. We, in the state of Vermont, border on Canada. Canada has an enormous surplus of hydroelectric power. What I believe we should be announcing very loudly and very clearly is, let's close down that nuclear power plant as quickly as we can. I think we can close it down in 3 years. I think immediately you begin negotiating with the provinces of Quebec for cheap hydropower. I think in the long run you can get that power as inexpensively as the nuclear power is available to us today, and I think in the long run we're going to sleep a lot more safely at night without that nuclear power.
Lieutenant Governor Peter Smith.
If you look at where the problem came from after Chernobyl and after the Yankee shutdown for retooling this summer, there was a real scare here. And it was because a man by the name of Denton from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was quoted by some state officials as saying that there was something like a 90% chance that Vermont Yankee would totally demolish in the case of a total meltdown. So what we now, and people were anxious, and I was anxious. What we now know is that, in fact, Professor Rasmussen from MIT, nuclear physicist, who wrote the report that Mr. Denton was quoting, has come back and said his assessment of that report was very pessimistic. And in fact, the Vermont Yankee study, which was just finished, which shows something like a 7% chance of total failure in the case of a meltdown, is far, far more accurate. What I think we've got to understand here is that none of us are going to take a back seat when we're talking about public safety. That's really not the issue. The issue, as far as I can tell, is whether or not we want 50 state regulatory agencies supplementing the NRC, or whether we want to speak through the national governors, wherever we go, through the Congress, to have the NRC have a higher and more firm and more explicit standard for safety, so that we don't have states which become havens for or less safe plants, and other states which pay for power from other sources. I think Yankee ought to stay open. I think we ought to continue to close it, to retool it, and I think the governor of this state ought to get his or her hands on this problem, not rely on a new division or more bureaucrats in order to solve it, duplicating expenses, but in fact get in, jawbone, and force the NRC and Vermont Yankee to come to the table.
Governor Kunin.
I think the real question is the Vermont nuclear power plant safe? And as governor, I have taken very specific steps to make certain that it is. When our plant was down for 9 months for repairs, in the interim, Chernobyl happened, raised a lot of legitimate anxiety about Chernobyl. And also the study came out that said plants of the type of Vermont Yankee that had a Mark I containment system did have a 90% chance of the failure of that containment system if there was a nuclear meltdown. Needless to say, That did cause a great deal of anxiety and frankly justifiable. I think the world of nuclear power is different as a result of Chernobyl. But it also is different in the sense that we have to make rational decisions based on the best information that we have. It so happens that Vermont has 1/3 of its power from the Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant. If I have evidence that that plant is unsafe, I would be the first person to call for the shutdown of that plant. What I am seeking, and what we are in the process of obtaining, is objective information as to how we can increase the level of safety. I've been a governor who's been very outspoken on nuclear power. I've asked for a resolution which was passed at the National Governors Conference to allow states in certain defined instances to have higher safety standards than the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. If our containment system is different than others in the country, we should be able to have tougher standards than other states. At the same time, before I call for the shutdown of that plant, I want to make certain that we have competitively priced power and that there is a genuine question of safety. In the meantime, I'm putting the heat on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and on Vermont Yankee to increase the level of safety by strengthening that containment system. That is a reasonable, rational approach. I don't think you have to fall into an anti-nuke or a pro-nuke position. What we're looking for is safe, affordable power for the people of the state.
Winona, Minnesota, you're our next caller. Go ahead, please.
I should like to ask the governor what the situation is with regard to the acid rain situation. And thank you. I'll hang up now.
All right, thanks for the call. Governor Kunin, acid rain.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that people from Minnesota are concerned about acid rain as we are. It's probably one of the major environmental issues for us in the state of Vermont. And we, with other northeastern states and with Canada, have jointly put a tremendous amount of pressure on the Congress and on the President and on the EPA to have some tough standards in place. In the meantime, in the state of Vermont, we're doing what we can as well. We have had a visibility study that we believe our visibility at our higher elevations is caused by emissions from the Midwestern states. And to meet EPA's own standards of what our visibility should be, we have requested that the EPA reduce the emissions from those western states. We hope that they will pay attention to that request. They are now seriously considering that. We're using every tool available through our congressional delegation, through our own studies, to have an impact. But basically, it's a question that is a tug of war in the Congress and within the Environmental Protection Agency.
Lieutenant Governor Peter Smith, what would you do if elected?
I think that acid rain is a subject in which the three of us are going to agree, and in fact, the previous governor agreed also. And much of the work that the governor has just talked about and the attitude that she has carried forward is one that was inherited from the previous administration. In the essence, I don't think the Congress is going to solve this problem because it's a deep political problem. We have senators from Ohio, Indiana, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, where thousands of jobs depend on the industry which creates the coal which goes into those factories, those plants. I think the person in this state who deserves commendation and where the real progress is going to be made beyond the job owning and all of the things that we would do, and I would do them too, is the Attorney General, Jeffrey Amestoy, who in fact has joined other Northeastern Attorney Generals to take the acid rain case to court. That, in the end, maybe unfortunately, but realistically, is where this problem is going to be solved, and it's going to be solved on a legal basis, I think, long before the politicians can reach common cause with it.
Mayor Sanders.
In the state of Vermont today, thousands of acres of our best farmland is being destroyed by acid rain. The President of the United States and the Democrats and the Republicans in Congress have a strange set of priorities. They're willing to appropriate hundreds of millions of dollars to overthrow the government of Nicaragua, to spend or propose $1 trillion for the Star Wars program, $300 billion for the military every year, but somehow or another, the leadership in Washington just can't find the money to solve the problem of acid rain without laying off thousands of workers in the Midwest. What this issue of acid rain is about, it is symptomatic of the priorities that exist in Washington. And one of the reasons that I am running for governor, acid rain is one of many, is that in this country you've got to have leadership which challenges those absurd, irrational priorities. The environment is precious. All of us agree on that. There's no question about that. What we need now is leadership all over this country to say to Mr. Reagan, the Democrats and the Republicans in Congress, hey, stop spending your hundreds of billions on the military and overthrowing the government of Nicaragua. Let's deal with the environment. Let's not cut back on environmental protection. And let's solve the problem of acid rain immediately.
We're live from Montpelier, Vermont. We're here to take a look at Vermont politics. Joining us now, three of the major candidates for governor in the state. If you have a question or comment, we'd like to hear from you, and you can use those numbers which will appear periodically at the bottom of your screen. Rutland, Vermont, you're next. Go ahead, please.
Yes, here in Rutland, we are presently witnessing the construction of a waste-to-energy plant. And recently there was a report that was put out by Professor Brooks from the Vermont Law School and others that reported on the projected pollution problems that would be associated with the Vicon project. And I was wondering if the candidates could tell me whether they agree with this report and what their position is on the Vicon project.
Governor Kunin, why don't you start with that?
Well, the Vicon project, which is a waste-to-energy plant, as the questioner described, has been very thoroughly reviewed. In fact, my administration reopened the whole process to make doubly certain that this plant will comply with the very strictest of air quality standards. I have not had an opportunity to analyze this law professor's report, but I'm confident that when an air quality permit is issued for this plant, it will be under circumstances that do assure safety. I think we are in a period where we have to recognize that any form of the disposal of trash or waste is going to have some consequences. You can't have something that you can't see, you can't hear, you can't smell, and that just dissipates into another planet. But we do have a responsibility to make certain that there are no ill health effects. And I'm confident that the stringency of this permit process will guarantee that.
Lieutenant Governor Smith.
I haven't seen the report either, and I'm hoping when the governor gets done looking at it, she'll send us a copy. We're going to try to lay our hands on it too. I think there's no doubt that there are serious questions about trash to energy disposal. We just simply have to wait and see, and we have to be as careful as we can be. But I'll tell you, if it comes down that we're not going to build that plant because people's safety is in danger, then we're not going to build it. I have taken the step, and I'm the only candidate here that has taken the step, of really biting the bullet on solid waste and recycling and saying we need a 15-year plan. We need to look at how we put our current landfills to bed, zip them up, if you will. That costs money. And right now, the state's playing the role of a policeman, not the role of a partner with our local communities. And we got to see this as a common problem. We got to figure out how to capitalize, pay for, together, regional state-of-the-art landfills, and if we can solve this problem on trash to energy, one or more of those. But the fact is, the longer we wait, the worse the solid waste problem gets in this state, and it is a bomb that is ticking, and it isn't going to go away. It's a crisis already, and it's going to be worse in 5 years. Recycling, I think we can turn that into an economic activity, and I think we ought to do it pretty quickly, because people up here need jobs and need a good business.
Mayor Sanders.
Well, I suppose I'm the only one up here who has had the privilege or lack of privilege of actually vetoing a resource recovery plan. When I became mayor of the city of Burlington, there was a plan established by my predecessor to build a resource recovery plant right in the center of the city of Burlington, and I vetoed it. I vetoed it for economic reasons as well as environmental reasons. What you're dealing with is a very complicated, difficult problem, and I don't know the answer. There are very serious, sober, brilliant people, such as Barry Commoner, who simply don't trust what the industry is saying. Don't believe the figures that are being released, feel that dioxins that are being emitted into the air, that are coming down to the earth, that are being eaten by cows, that could get into the food chain, are really insurmountable problems. I honestly don't know the answer. I am nervous about it. Here in the city of Burlington, we have established, for example, a recycling program. Clearly, one of the things that we wanted to do is to get as much of the trash out of the system as possible. We are improving our landfill right now. I think it's probably as good as any in the state of Vermont. To answer your question is, I don't know the answer. I am very, very scared, very nervous about these resource to recovery plants, and I just don't have enough information to say whether we go with them or not. Clearly, if we do go with them, the requirements have got to be very, very stringent. In point of fact, there are people who say, let's not go with them at all, and my mind is open as to what the final results will be. I just don't know at this point.
Phone lines are open. If you have a question or comment, please feel free to join our discussion. Next call is from St. Croix in the Virgin Islands. Go ahead, please.
Good evening. My question concerns hazardous waste. and maybe this is something that shouldn't be discussed on national TV, but there are several hazardous waste sites in Vermont, with perhaps the most famous or the most infamous one being Williamstown, Vermont. My question to Mayor Sanders and Lieutenant Governor Smith is what they would do to ensure that Williamstown is properly cleaned up. After 3 years, we still don't have, people of Williamstown still don't have a new water supply. What they would do to ensure that is built in a speedy cleanup. And my question to the governor is, why, after talking such a good environmental game during the campaign, did she turn her back onto the people of Williamstown, refusing to come to meetings in Williamstown, not returning phone calls, or her office not returning phone calls, and why after 2 years there isn't a new water supply in Williamstown?
Okay, before you go, where are you calling from, caller?
I'm a displaced Williamstown person, and I now live in the Virgin Islands.
And how are you watching us? You have your own satellite dish?
No, cable system.
All right, thanks for the call. We appreciate it. Mayor Sanders, why don't you start?
In a state with as rural a population as ours, the state government itself has got to play an enormously active role in the area of environmental protection. Most of the communities, the city of Burlington is far and away the largest city in the state, and we don't have the resources to deal effectively with the exploding new technologies and analyzing the problems. The state itself has got to play a leadership role. In point of fact, the state of Vermont sued the Environmental Conservation Agency. In truth, we lost the suit, but we sued them because, in our view, the statutes of the state of Vermont are very clear about the need for the Environmental Conservation Agency to take the leadership role to solve these problems. I have talked to some of the people in Williamstown. I've talked to people around the state of Vermont. And I think what they are saying and what the caller is saying is right, that the state has not been as vigorous as it should be. It is good to be concerned. Everybody is concerned. It is good to hold press conferences. But in point of fact, it takes money and it takes courage to go out there and solve the problems. I don't think the state has been doing that.
Lieutenant Governor.
Once again, I think the position of the state over the last three years on the Williamstown situation specifically, the leadership role fell to the Attorney General of the state of Vermont. They brought a suit. It was a difficult suit. The fact of the matter is the state won the suit. The company has made redress, and it's a difficult problem. It's going to take time to clean it up. I can't speak for what the involvement of the governor has or hasn't been. Obviously, that's up to her, and that was your different question to her. But when these problems happen, to me, the only thing you can do, as difficult as they are, is go after the people, determine whose fault it is, go after them, make them pay, and fix the problem. And I think it's taken time, and it's been enormously difficult for the people of that town, and I understand that. But in fact, that has been happening. And I think we oughtn't to confuse the difficulty of the problem with the solution, as slow as it may have seemed, as long as it may be taking, with the certainty that the problem is going to be solved.
Governor Kunin.
I'm afraid the caller has been out of touch with what is happening at Williamstown, because in fact, Williamstown is a prime example of the aggressive steps that this administration has taken in terms of cleanup. The first decision that I had to make the day after I was sworn in as governor was whether to accept a previously negotiated agreement with the previous Attorney General and administration on Williamstown. I rejected it because it was not good enough. It did not have the kind of redress, did not address the basic problems of the people of Williamstown. We worked, I'd say, almost day and night on having a new arrangement with Williamstown, and I would say almost everybody in Williamstown is very grateful that we did that. And today the people of Williamstown have a much better deal. They have much better redress. They will have exactly what they need for a safe school and for a safe drinking water system. And I'm very proud of what we did. We worked cooperatively with the Attorney General, but it was this administration and all the people in it that took the lead, and I'm very proud of that. We held hearing after hearing in Williamstown. We gave much opportunity for public input, and I'm afraid the caller is misinformed, because Williamstown is an example of what a tough administration can do to turn around a situation that was quite dangerous for the people there.
For the last 4 days, we've been live from the governor's reception room in the Vermont state capitol, and we'd like to thank all the people that have allowed us to do this and cooperated with us. Some of those include the Sergeant-at-Arms Reed Payne and Teresa Randall at the State House. We appreciate their cooperation, and many of the other people that have worked with us and allowing us to do this. We appreciate it. It's a very old, historic building, and if you're ever in Montpelier and you have a chance, come here and take a tour because you'll probably learn an awful lot about U.S. history, not to mention Vermont history. Next call, Middlebury, Vermont. You're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Hello. My question has to do with low-income people. And I would like to ask each one of the candidates what it is from their campaign that they are offering low-income people. And I would like to specifically talk about something other than tax relief.
Lieutenant Governor, why don't we start with you on that one?
Let me give you one specific example. This state is about to receive in the neighborhood of someplace between $7 and $10 million, one from a suit with major law firms, oil companies, I'm sorry. Now the question is, what do we do with that money? My proposal has been that we put that money into a revolving trust fund, invested at the state level. It would take legislation to do this, so that low-income people, people who need housing rehabbed or developed, can do that out of a perpetual fund, living off the income of this housing trust fund. So what we could do is set people in a position where they could strengthen the houses they have, make them more energy efficient, and help them with new housing. It's a proposal we've talked about with low-income representatives. We have an opportunity to do something to endow a real problem that low-income people in the state of Vermont face, as well as low-income people all over this country. It's a once, really in a lifetime opportunity. All of the other proposals that I've seen are, in fact, to spend this $7 to $10 million, to spend it in the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, and then it'll be gone forever. I don't think we ought to spend it. I think we ought to invest it so that down the road we can continue to have a housing policy for poor people, low-income people in the state of Vermont.
Governor Madeleine Kunin.
I might just add that every state is getting its share of that oil overcharge money, and it has very definite federal stipulations. So this may be a well-intentioned proposal, but we have to be able to tailor it to what the federal demands are on this, whether we like it or not. I am initiating, and it's already started, I'm going to invest a great deal of time and energy in the future in a program called Reach Up, which basically helps low-income people get jobs and enter the labor force. This Reach Up program will particularly focus on single parents who need the kind of assistance to get into the labor force, job training, child care, transportation, and to bridge the gap between welfare and work. Our goal is to get 1,000 people off of welfare in this coming year. I think we're going to do it. I'm very excited about it. The best program we can provide for low-income people is a decent job which allows people to support themselves. And wherever possible, that's the goal of this administration. Where not possible, we have a responsibility to maintain people so that they can have security, and that is also a goal of ours.
Mayor Bernard Sanders.
I strongly disagree with both of my opponents on the issue of what we should be doing for low-income people. And I'm very proud of the record that we've established in the city of Burlington, where we developed a wide range of programs to benefit low-income people without the kind of resources available here at the state of Vermont. We started a daycare center, one of the nicest daycare centers in the state of Vermont. We started emergency shelters so the people in the city of Burlington no longer have to sleep on the street. We've started some of the most exciting housing programs in the state of Vermont. We started a shelter for battered women, and a whole host of programs. But I think let's step back for a moment and look at the overall problem. What's going on in this country today and in this state today is that the rich, in fact, are getting richer, and working people and poor people are in worse shape than they've ever been. Their standard of living is radically declining. What you need in the state of Vermont is tax reform which will free up minimum $50 million, which will provide adequately for social services in the state of Vermont. It is not acceptable to me that we have a crisis in daycare, for example, so that working mothers, and we're not just talking about the Reach Up program, which is nothing more than a continuation of the WIN program. We need to spend a minimum of $1.5 million building daycare centers around the state of Vermont so the women have the opportunity to go out to work. We're talking about raising the minimum wage. Neither of my opponents are supporting the suggestion that I made that if elected governor, raise the minimum wage to $4 an hour because people can't afford to live on $3.45 an hour. Serious tax reform, property tax reform, which takes the burden of taxation off of lower moderate income people and places on those people and institutions who can afford to pay. The most important issue, though, when you deal with low-income people is this fact, and I'm going to make this fact slowly because I want it to seep in. Every night we watch television and we look at South Africa and we say, isn't that a tragedy there? The blacks in South Africa, they can't vote, they don't have political rights. The fact of the matter is that in the state of Vermont, the overwhelming majority of poor and working people have given up on the political process. They don't vote. They don't believe in the Democratic Party. They don't believe in the Republican Party. During this campaign, I believe strongly, I am the only candidate who's gone out to the trailer parks, to the low-income housing projects, and I'm knocking on the door. And you know what people say? Why should I bother to vote? It doesn't make a damn bit of difference. The rich people control what's going on. I do not believe in tinkering with the system. What we have done in Burlington is taken on our ruling class. We've taken on the people who have owned the city historically. We've made many changes. That's what has got to happen in the state of Vermont. We need a governor who's going to stand up for low-income and working people and make the right fight, not cut back on programs that are desperately needed.
Before we go to the next call, very quickly, Lieutenant Governor, would you favor raising the minimum wage in Vermont?
No, I wouldn't, and I got to tell you that, in fact, in responding to the mayor, really what you've just said is nonsense. I have campaigned in trailer parks, and I've campaigned in low-income housing projects, and I've campaigned in the old north end of Burlington, and I've talked to people that I've known all my life. And I'm just talking to different people than you are, Mayor. I have to tell you, when we're talking about what we're going to do for poor people, we have to talk about the investment we already make, because I've taken a very clear stand. We are not going to buy our way out of the problems that we're into. We need to look at human service delivery, look at what we've learned in the last 20 years, ask the people who deliver human services at the field level, and reform that system from the bottom up so that we get more efficiency, whole person treatment, and that's going to take leadership. And I'm going to be a governor
raising the minimum wage.
I would not raise the minimum wage, no.
Governor Kunin, would you favor raising the minimum wage?
Right now, we're in the process of raising the minimum wage. The legislature passed a law raising it 10 cents each year. After the third year, I would consider raising it again. I think it's very difficult to live on the minimum wage. But we also have to have decent paying jobs. You can't live on $4. You can't raise a family on $4. In fact, there are very few $4 an hour jobs in the state of Vermont today. We have to have decent paying jobs. And that's what is the goal of my administration.
San Diego, California, patiently waiting 3,000 miles away. Go ahead, please.
I don't want to break the continuity too much, but she did mention last on minimum wage. And today, with the breakdown of families, it's more important for young people to be able to support themselves outside of the home. My question is directed more towards what you were talking about earlier about energy. This is directed to all of you. Do you feel that we can live without an energy source like the sun? The obvious answer is no. We should be directing our energies to harvesting that and protecting that future source of energy. The country isn't running on solar energy, but out here in California we try to. You know what I mean? It's really important for us to kind of realize that is definitely in the future.
So your question is about how much solar power, how much the state of Vermont is relying upon solar power?
Pardon?
Is that the question, caller? I think we get it. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Mayor Sanders, why don't you start?
Obviously, he wasn't here this summer. We didn't have very much sun. But I think he raises a very good question. And that question, again, gets back to the issue of nuclear power. One of the tragedies of this period in history is that the corporations who control the energy production in this country have made a decision to spend probably hundreds of billions of dollars in research and development of nuclear power. I think most sane people understand that if a fraction of that money was spent in other types of energy development, today the United States of America would be able to have less expensive energy and a lot safer energy. I think clearly here in the state of Vermont, we've got to explore all the alternatives that we can. We've got to be far more vigorous in terms of weatherization and energy conservation as well.
Lieutenant Governor?
Well, I've already talked about weatherization and conservation and how to do that for the people who can least afford to do it for themselves. The fact is, if you look at what Vermonters rely on for their energy, you have the whole mix. You have low-head hydro, you have solar, you have oil, you have coal, you have wood. And what we've discovered is that for virtually every one of them, there's a downside as well as an upside. And I think what we're after is a mix. It's a mix, and I think the state, with that mix, does a couple of things. One, it preserves itself and it stabilizes itself against a major change in any one of those sources. And two, it keeps prices down for people.
Governor.
I think Vermonters are good conservationists by virtue of necessity, because one of the nice things about this program is you can suddenly see the world from California's eyes and Vermont's eyes. And obviously, we have somewhat less solar energy than you do in California, though surprisingly, during the energy crunch, we did do things like have solar heated calf barns in below zero temperature And we're going to continue with those kinds of innovations. But conservation has to be part of our mix because we're so dependent on energy for survival in this part of the country. And that's going to be our strategy for the future, as it has been in hard times. The challenge will be to continue doing that while the price of oil for the period that we're in right now is low.
C-SPAN's Campaign 86 is spending an hour and a half this evening looking at politics in Vermont, this evening specifically the race for governor in the state of Vermont. One question that comes to my mind is, in running for the office of governor, what does it pay? What does one receive for being governor of Vermont, Governor Kunin?
I think I got a raise in the last legislative session, and it's, I think, $62,500.
What are the benefits? How does that rate? You were at the National Governors Association meeting down in Hilton Head. What goes along with that? Some of the benefits of being governor. Is there a mansion for the governor?
No, Vermont is a frugal and modest state in every sense. And there is no mansion. There are no what you call perks like helicopters and airplanes. I have a driver and live in my own house, and I kind of like it that way.
What does the office of lieutenant governor receive in the state of Vermont?
I think this year I received $25,000 a year, and for all the perks that the governor doesn't have, I have fewer. But I think, in fact, what draws us to public service, and one of the things that, frankly, I'm concerned about that we're losing in this state, but I think what draws most people to public service in this state is the ideal of serving. It is not an area in which you're going to make a lot of money. And the legislature is still a citizen legislature where people from all walks of life come together to make law for not a lot of money. And that's something I think we're proud of and we're going to fight to defend.
You have a job outside of being lieutenant governor?
No, I do not.
What does the office of mayor in Burlington, Vermont pay?
Well, we haven't gotten many raises lately, but I think we're up to about $43,000 a year. But that includes having to answer the calls about the dogs that are barking late at night, getting the snow off the street in the middle of the night, so it's probably earned that money.
Phone lines are open. If you have a question or comment, please feel free to join our discussion. Burlington, you're on. Go ahead, please.
Mayor Sanders.
Yep.
Why don't the governor and lieutenant governor work for the minimum wage? The governor and lieutenant governor are social connivers for personal gain. I know them both. And they do not represent the powerless people of Vermont. They represent big interests. Take it from me, I know. Corruption is Vermont's #1 problem, Bernard, and you know it. You the mayor. That's what you got to bring up. Wait a minute. That's what you got to bring up. If you're pure, you'll bring it up, and you'll win the governorship of Vermont.
Burlington, thanks for the call, Mayor Sanders.
Well, I don't know how pure I am, but I don't accept the basis that that gentleman was talking about. Certainly, I think, in fact, in the state of Vermont, one of the things that all of us are very proud of is that, by and large, with occasional exceptions, but by and large, public servants in the state work very, very hard, do not in general get paid a whole lot of money, and are honest, decent people. And no one has ever suggested, I think, in this campaign anything to the contrary. I strongly disagree with Governor Kunin and Lieutenant Governor Smith regarding their desire not to raise the minimum wage. I mean, I think the $3.45 is not a livable wage. $4 an hour today, $4.20 next year, $4.40 is the beginning of starting to pay our workers a living wage. But I don't believe that the fact that the governor and the lieutenant governor are opposed to that indicates that they're corrupt. I think there's a difference of opinion here.
Governor Kunin, any response from a constituent in Burlington?
Let me just correct. I'm not opposed to raising the minimum wage. We are raising it, and I said I would. I said I would, after that raise goes through, support an additional raise. But I am kind of disturbed by that question because it really is not typical of the view of politics in Vermont. If anything, we do have a very honest and accountable system. And I notice the mayor doesn't work for the minimum wage either, but that's not the question. The real question is that politics is real, politics is honest, and I know of absolutely no smidgen of corruption in the state, and I'm very proud of that.
Lieutenant Governor?
Well, I would just say that, honestly, I don't think the question, which wasn't a question, merits a response. I would say that the real problem, and one of the reasons that I got into this race, is that when you talk to working people, and the issue isn't the minimum wage, when you talk to working people who live in the countryside of the state of Vermont, they're worried about whether or not they're going to be able to afford to continue to live there. What we need to do is create a diverse and a rugged economy, agriculture, the travel industry, manufacturing, service. so that people can choose. And that's what drives and strengthens the wage structure and drives wages up, is economic competition, not a false bottom. And that's where we ought to put our energy, into better education, into better economic development, so that people have choices. That's where power comes from, choices.
Manhattan, New York. Go ahead, please.
Yes, my name is Blake Morris, and I'm a resident in the town of Bradford, Vermont. I'm calling to address the governor and lieutenant governor and Mr. Sanders in regards to the situation of liability insurance in Vermont. I'm a small business owner in Bradford, and commercial liability insurance has gone sky high, especially in the area of liquor liability insurance, where there's only one underwriter in the state. I'd like to know if they have any plans to address this as the governor next year.
Governor?
Thank you. Well, Vermont is not immune from the problems that have been facing other states, but I think you have to be very careful as you try to limit liability, because that does not necessarily result in availability of cheaper insurance. And we really do have a responsibility here, too, to those people who are the victims of people driving under the influence of alcohol. Through our insurance commissioner, we are carefully reviewing this situation. We may have some recommendations for the next legislative session. But simply putting a cap on liability does not automatically assure availability. We are providing assistance to purchasers of insurance to help them shop around to get affordable insurance. We will continue to do that, and we are exploring legislation for the next session.
Mayor Sanders.
It's the gentleman who called hit the nail on the head. It is a very serious problem, and during the course of this campaign, we're going to try to deal with it in a definitive way. What the problem is cities and towns throughout the state, including the city of Burlington, have seen rapid increases in our liability insurance, which has to be passed on back to the taxpayers. Taxi cab owners have seen increases, bars have seen increases, small business people have seen increases, fairs. The wonderful events that have gone on for years and years. I was at a fair in Milton, and they're not sure that they're going to be able to carry it on next year because of the difficulties of liability insurance. I think there are a couple of issues that you have to tackle here. I think one of them is to perhaps take a very good look at the monopolies in the insurance industry and seeing the reasons why it is becoming very, very difficult for people and for institutions to get affordable insurance. And second of all, to see about the possibility of the state playing an increasing role in providing insurance, actually, to communities and institutions that need it.
Lieutenant Governor Smith.
I think it would come as no surprise to you that I disagree with both my opponents. First of all, let's look at what we could have done last year, because the gentleman spoke about liquor liability, and we had a very good piece of liquor liability capping legislation, dram shop legislation, and it was lost in the legislature in the closing days. And one of the reasons it was lost because of the failure of the governor and the administration and the Democratic leadership, and it's in writing, to lead on that issue. It had been approved by 6 or 7 standing committees of both houses of our legislature, worked out by the industry with state government, and it went down the drain. And that's too bad. That's too bad. Now, what we've got to do is cap liability. We can study this. We can study it forever. But we've got a cap toward liability, and we've got to figure out also how to protect public servants, whether they're elected or whether they're appointed, how to protect them, and how to make sure that the property taxpayers of this state don't become the ultimate deep pocket when somebody decides to sue a public official, locally or at the state level. I think it's time that we simply sat down, wrote the legislation, and enacted it.
Governor Madeleine Kunin.
I'd just like to reply to a statement made by the Lieutenant Governor. I didn't hear him say boo about this issue when he was Lieutenant Governor presiding over the Senate. So I don't know where his leadership was in getting this bill out of his Senate committee.
Lieutenant Governor?
You know, the fact of the matter is that I don't know where the governor was, but we were working around that committee and with House leadership, and she may not remember much about the last 3 days of the legislative session because she was in her office most of the time. But this was a bill that was there, people wanted it, and it didn't go, and I was right up front on it and working on it the whole time.
Montpelier, Vermont, you're on. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
You're on the air, Montpelier. Turn your TV set down and you'll get rid of that echo.
I've been teaching for 30 years, and state spending on education has increased dramatically. But good teachers are leaving the profession regularly, burned out very early. There simply seems to be more state regulations, far too many non-teaching, non-academic duties, endless meetings. Can the governor tell us what we've received in return for that spending increase, and how the candidates feel about education spending and excellence?
Caller, before you go, have you decided who you're going to vote for?
Pardon me?
Have you decided who you're going to vote for?
No.
All right. Thanks for the call, Governor Kunin.
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that Vermont has been able to increase the state's contribution for education by 25%. And it has resulted in Vermont teachers' salaries going up much faster than the national average. It has held the line on property taxes, and it has improved quality. My Republican opponent talks about improving quality education, but he objects to the fact that we increased the budget, and we increased the budget solely because of education. You cannot have quality education without willing to pay for some of it. Now, paying more money is not the entire answer, but neither can you do it all on rhetoric. Just talking about it won't do it. We have improved the quality of education in this state. We got kindergarten for every Vermont school child, something that is of the essence for early childhood education. And I see tremendous progress, and I'm going to continue to push for increased funding, for increased quality for education at every single level.
Lieutenant Governor Smith.
I think the question was, after years of putting more money in, who was going to speak to the question of excellence? Good teachers are leaving the classroom. I've had the privilege of serving on 3 different national study groups, the Carnegie Corporation, the Office of Education, and another one, to look at the relationship between teacher preparation, the way teachers are treated in the classroom, and can we retain good teachers. And the reason they leave is not money. Money is 4th or 5th, and it's a problem, and I understand that. The reason they leave is because we don't treat them like professionals. And we talked to 125 of our finest teachers this last spring in Vermont, and what did they tell us? They said, we see the problem in front of us every day, and we don't have the time, because of state regulations, we don't have the time to do the educating that we're hired to do. That's why gifted teachers are leaving the classroom. My campaign will have specific reform proposals to help education get better in the classroom, because that's where teachers teach, and that's where children learn. That's where they live every day. And until we make that a place where professionals have the flexibility to do the job they're trained and hired and paid to do, until we give them that flexibility, we're not going to see education get better, and we're not going to keep good teachers in the classroom. You can't regulate your way to excellence. That's the path this state's been on. It's expensive in dollars, and it's expensive in lost opportunities for kids, and it's expensive in terms of the good teachers that we lose.
Mayor Bernard Sanders.
I have this figgamajig in my ear, and I may have misheard what the governor said, but I wrote it down, and I thought she said that we have held the line on property taxes. I live in the state of Vermont. That is not my perception of the reality that's going on in the state. This year, according to the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, property taxes went up by $28 million. In the last 5 years, I'm guessing a minimum of $100 million increase. In Burlington alone, because of the disastrous state aid to education formula, we raised property taxes for education by $1.7 million. What has got to happen, there is a crisis in this state, and I want to talk about it for a moment, because I think it's perhaps the most important issue that we're going to have to be dealing with. We saw it in Heinsberg last year, we saw it in South Burlington this year. On one side, you have teachers and you have school boards who want, absolutely correctly, decent quality education for the kids. On the other side, you have working people, farmers, poor people who simply cannot afford higher and higher property taxes to fund education. And every year we're seeing school budgets turned down, we're seeing communities bitterly divided by this issue. We will have a proposal which will be based on progressive taxation, which will significantly increase state aid to education. Governor Kunin increased it this year by $10 million. That's something. It's a start, but it is nowhere near enough. We still continue to lag far behind the rest of this country in terms of state aid to education. Second of all, we've got to have direct property tax relief. With decoupling and progressive taxation, we can do both, and that's what I intend to do if elected governor.
Manchester, New Hampshire, your next caller. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm calling from New Hampshire, and a major concern to me is the race in New Hampshire concerning nuclear power. Recently, Governor Sununu at the Governor's Council was stated that he was willing to spend a lot of money to defeat a resolution proposed by Governor Kunin of Vermont. I'd like to have some talk about that from all 3 candidates.
All right, thanks for the call, Governor Kunin.
Thank you. Actually, it wasn't to defeat the resolution, it was to defeat me. So that, I think that was the aftermath of the resolution having been passed. I think we just have a very different view about nuclear power between the governor of New Hampshire and myself. I offered the resolution that asked the Congress to hold hearings on giving the states more authority over the safety of nuclear power plants. That doesn't mean we should take over the function of the NRC, but it does mean that if our citizens want a higher standard of safety, we should be permitted to do that in certain areas, just as we do in certain environmental areas. And that's where we disagree. The governor of New Hampshire is saddled with Seabrook, as you know, and he took this very personally as an attack on Seabrook. It was not. It was my purpose to make sure that our Vermont nuclear power plant is safe, and I intend to continue in that vein to make certain that states do have some authority, because in the end we have the final responsibility of determining whether or not a plant is safe. And if we don't have any preview to that, to add to the level of safety, our authority is fairly empty.
In some of our programming here from Montpelier and talking about this specific issue, it keeps coming up again and again, this tension between Governor Kunin and Governor Sununu. Has it been there for your 2 years in office? What's the history behind this?
Well, we're very different states, and obviously we're a different party and we take a different view on things, but I don't think it's a tension that pervades everything, and it shouldn't. I certainly look forward to working cooperatively on many other issues. We share a river, we share bridges, we have many things in common, but on certain issues and basic values, I think we are different.
There also was a question as to how much money Governor John Sununu said he would raise to defeat you. Was it $1 million?
That's what he told one of my aides. He did not tell me directly. He was talking to a staff person, but there are other people who heard that figure quoted.
Lieutenant Governor Smith, any comment about the question about nuclear power?
Well, I think it's important, first of all, to assure you, regretfully, that I haven't received the check yet. And of course, it would be in violation of the law. It would be in violation of the law, and I think it's too serious a subject to joke about. This story, good to look at where it came from. It came from the Kunin administration, and it came the day after I had alerted people of this state. Excuse me, Governor, I'm talking. And it came the day after I notified people that they were going to lose a $16 million tax cut. And the administration and the governor's campaign didn't want people to think about that too much, so what they did was leak a story. Okay? That's what happened. It was, I wasn't present in the conversation. Neither were any members of the press. This was news, media, manufacturing, pure and simple. And Governor Sununu and the governor of Vermont may disagree or they may agree. But the fact of the matter is that has, excuse me.
Governor, let him finish and then I'll let you respond.
I would like, if you don't mind, to say a word too.
The fact of the matter is, what a surprise. The fact of the matter is that I don't know what was said there, and neither does she, and neither does the media. But of course, he's not going to be involved in this campaign. I'm involved in this campaign. I'm running it, and if I'm governor, I'm going to have my hands on the state of Vermont government, and I'm going to run that every day too.
I set the rule that everybody would be able to respond, so Mayor, why don't you go ahead next?
I think Peter picked up on a point which is an interesting point, and that is this. The governor was at a governor's conference, and I watched some of that. I must say on your C-SPAN, I watch this thing now and then, and it's a good program. And one of the things that one learns at a governor's conference is that you have 50 governors running down there, each one going back to their states, telling about all the important resolutions that are almost unanimously passed. It's good. I mean, frankly, mayors do this occasionally too, I do admit that. But I think the issue here is not primarily resolutions passed at governor's conference expressing concern about nuclear power, or the governor's quite right, I want to see the state of Vermont have far more power determining the safety of that nuclear power plant. Really, once again, what the issue is not Mr. Sununu's $1 million. Believe me, I don't think $1 million is going to come into this campaign. Like Peter, I have not yet received the check either. I think really the issue gets back to nuclear power. And the issue is not resolutions, not concern. Every person in the state of Vermont is concerned. Everybody up here is. Every sane human being is frightened about this technology. The issue is, do we say no or do we express concern? That's really what the issue of nuclear power is about.
Governor?
I'd just like to set the record straight because the Lieutenant Governor's remarks seem to imply that this was not accurate. My staff does not tell things to me that are not true. There were many witnesses to that. And actually, when the press went to Governor Sununu, he did not deny it. He only said he didn't know where he'd find $1 million. So I think that's, frankly, I was flattered by the whole thing. I thought it's overblown. The whole point is states should have some control over their nuclear power plants and some say in the safety question.
There's a voter waiting, but Lieutenant Governor.
I didn't say it wasn't accurate, Governor. I said you manufactured the news, and you did it in a very effective way to keep people from thinking about a very real problem raised by your administration. Working men and women in this state aren't going to get a $17 million tax cut in the state personal income tax that they would have gotten if you'd followed the deficit reduction spending cap. That's what I said. It was manufactured by your administration. I didn't say it was inaccurate. It was good timing.
With that, we'll move on. Burlington, Vermont, good evening. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to direct this question to the mayor and to the governor. Do you believe that the governor has delivered on her promises to the people of the city of Burlington? The margin of her victory in the last election very clearly came from the city of Burlington. And it's not terribly clear that all of the referenda and so on that were passed by the people of the city, the governor acted expeditiously upon, and thereby perhaps cost the people of the city of Burlington a good deal of taxpayer money. That's my question.
Mayor Sanders.
Well, obviously, I'm a little bit prejudiced here because I am the mayor of the city of Burlington. And more importantly, though, I think the real issue is not whether the governor has kept the promises to the people of Burlington. It's basically whether the governor has acted appropriately for all of the cities and towns in the state of Vermont. As the mayor of the largest city in the state, as a member of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns for the last 5 years, let me say emphatically, in my view, the Kunin administration has not done that. Let me give 2 examples. Specifically, in terms of the state aid to education formula, that formula is a disaster. That formula is a disaster not only for the city of Burlington, where we get approximately $100 per kid, as opposed to some communities in the state of Vermont, which get $2,000 a kid. Now, honest people can disagree about what makes a decent state aid to education formula, okay? What's right? But no one will convince me that one community getting 20 times more than another community is right. In Burlington, we get $100 a kid. We had to raise property taxes $1.7 million last year precisely because of the state aid to education formula. But that's not just Burlington alone. Second of all, the state of Vermont last year, and again, as mayor of the city, I am very involved in this, talk to other city officials. We lost in the state of Vermont because of the Reagan administrations and the Congresses, Democratic and Republican Congress. Disastrous set of priorities, $12 to $13 million in revenue sharing. This is money which in our community went into police and fire protection, into other communities that went into other important civic needs. What we demanded, what the League of Cities and Towns put as their top priority was, Governor, help us replace this loss of revenue sharing so that we do not have to raise property taxes. That did not happen. That was the major priority of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. So I would answer that question by saying, no, the governor has not been responsive to the needs of the people of the city of Burlington, but as governor of the state, she has 245 other cities and towns to worry about, not just Burlington. In my view, the more important answer is that in terms of the relationship between state government and local government in general, we have been in a disastrous situation. Property taxes are rising very rapidly, and the Kunin administration, in my view, has not been responsive.
Governor Kunin.
I find myself in an interesting position with the mayor saying I should be spending a whole lot more money and the lieutenant governor saying I've spent too much money. As a matter of fact, I'm glad he does realize that I have a responsibility as governor to all of the people in this state. And I think we did just the right thing. We increased state aid to education. I'd like to reply to the lieutenant governor who keeps repeating this fact that we increased spending and therefore closed an opportunity, as he puts it. We increased spending for education. And that is money exactly well spent. And if we had not done that, we would not have the quality education he would like to have in theory, but is not willing to put into effect in practice, and we would have even higher property taxes. Now, Burlington, because it is considered a higher than average income town, the mayor is correct, did not benefit from that increase in state aid. But I can name you town after town after town that benefited substantially from that increase in state aid, held down its property taxes, increased its quality of education. And I believe I totally fulfilled my commitment in that regard. I promised a 25% increase in state aid, and I delivered a 25% increase in state aid. I promised to retire the deficit, and I did retire the deficit. You can always talk about spending. You can always talk about cutting. It's easy to talk about cutting, but let's be specific. Where, Mr. Smith, would you have cut that budget?
Lieutenant Governor Smith.
I'm glad you asked.
Yes.
You know, the fact of the matter is, and let me go a little farther with some of the numbers that I used earlier. We've increased spending $63 million in this state in the last 2 years. The governor would have you believe that her $17.8 million increase in state aid to education is the reason, that's the reason why your personal income tax isn't going to go down. But the numbers just don't bear it out. The fact is there would have been a little less money for state aid to education. But let's take a look at where that money really went. It went to 200 plus new state employees at a time when other state employees weren't able to get a labor contract that they thought was a good one. 200 new people built into the state budget at $25,000 a year in perpetuity, forever. Numbers of new programs started. The fact is, Governor, the public relations rhetoric sounds good, but it wasn't a trade between education funding and an income tax cut. It just wasn't. The numbers don't show it. So that's it. In fact, the plan was there, and you've said I was right, but a couple of times. The plan was there to limit spending to 6%. Now, excuse me, I've already told you, we would have not increased state employees, 200 of them. We would have not started some of the new programs, and we would have put a little bit more into state aid. And then we'd be able to take the highest tax rate combined in the United States of America, one of the 3 highest, and one of the poorest states, and reduce it. I think that would have been real progress.
I'm going to hold you there. Mayor Sanders, you had something you wanted to throw in.
Thank you very much. Okay. The governor made an interesting point. She's sitting here in the middle and being hit by Mr. Smith and being hit by me. It's a tough life. But here's what the point is, Governor, and I would hope that you would respond to this. As a result of Reagan's tax breaks to wealthy people and corporations, we have lost as a state close to $300 million of tax revenue in the last 6 years. The issue is not spending and the issue is not taxation. The issue is who is paying the taxes and where is the money going. That's really what the issue is. What we know right now is that wealthy people and corporations in the state of Vermont are paying less than they paid 5 years ago in combined state and federal taxes. We know that homeowners and poor people are paying significantly more in property taxes. So what you're seeing in the state of Vermont is an interesting tax situation. Wealthy people, corporations paying less in personal and corporate income tax, homeowners, low-income people paying more in property taxes. What we are proposing is serious tax reform, which both Governor Kunin and Lieutenant Governor Smith are running away from. We are saying, and will demonstrate, that in point of fact, we can lower the property tax burden on homeowners in the state by 20%. We can significantly increase state aid to education far more than what the governor is talking about. And we can do this without having anybody in the state of Vermont, not the richest person in the state of Vermont, paying more in combined state and federal taxes than they paid 5 years ago. I think that's the direction we should go. But we're going to have the guts to create a tax system here in the state of Vermont and not let Washington make the tax laws for us.
Hold you there, Governor Kunin.
Let me just add one very important note. This administration is going to enable the state of Vermont to have the biggest tax cut in its history, $20 million, as a result of getting rid of the surcharge that we enacted earlier because we retired the deficit and lived within our means. Now, the mayor talks about $300 million, simply getting that from the corporations and the rich. That's a mythology. There aren't those kinds of corporations. There aren't those kinds of rich people. Those are Vermonters who pay those taxes, and they're middle-income Vermonters. So it's easy to talk in theory and pinpoint evil as some distant place. But the Vermont economy, the Vermont taxpayer, isn't made up that way. You would be taking that money out of the pockets of Vermonters. It isn't done with blue smoke and mirrors.
A lot of callers who want to get through, a lot of questions to answer. So Sarasota, Florida, you're next. Go ahead, please.
Tourism and second home development and the ski industry are very important to the Vermont economy. And as a former Vermonter, I'm interested in knowing if the candidates plan to support these industries by encouraging increases in state dollars for tourist promotion.
Lieutenant Governor Smith.
Excuse me. Thank you for the question. The fact of the matter is that I've already said in my campaign that combining the existing promotional budgets we have in the state of Vermont, so we're going to have one integrated promotion for Vermont, so we get better bang for the dollar, quite frankly, and then increasing that promotion budget is one of the things I'm going to do. Travel industry, tourist industry included. You know why? Because it's an industry in this state, that's an investment that will increase state revenues. It will affect, if we increase the bed count in our hotels, existing hotels and motels in the state of Vermont, not a new sewer pipe, not a new electric wire, not a new room. If we just increase the people in those beds by 10% over a year, we'd have something like $40 million of business revenue, we'd have 1,000 new jobs, $2 million new state revenue, 100 new businesses. So it's an investment that'll pay back. You know, it's simply time for us to understand, when I talked about the question, will people who have to work for a living be able to continue to live in Vermont's countryside? And we talk about the kind of diverse economy we need to support people. The travel industry is part of that, and an important part of that. I would also tell you that I ran, and I was the only candidate in 1984 who ran on a platform that included a way to control rapid growth. And I'm going to do that again this year. But I can tell you, my plan isn't going to be a statewide land use plan approach. My plan is going to be a way that strengthens local communities, strengthens local decision makers, strengthens local planning boards, because that's the way to give people power. You don't give communities power by taking it away to the state level. We've got a good program, and we're going to keep it up. The answer is yes to your question on travel.
Mayor Sanders.
The question is a good question, and my answer is this. Tourism is clearly an important part of Vermont's economy. And in Burlington, obviously, as mayor of the city, I entered many, many negotiations with people in the business community. What we do not do in Burlington is give away people's tax dollars to wealthy people and corporations, or would be the case if I were governor, to the ski industry, because they're clamoring and because they need more money. Everybody needs more money. What you sit down and you do is you negotiate, and you say, if we give you this kind of money, what are we going to get back in terms of decent paying jobs? What are we going to get back in terms of tax revenue? And if you strike a good bargain, you go for it. And if you don't strike a good bargain, you don't go for it. I don't want to see poor and working people subsidizing wealthy people who happen to own the tourist industry. Second of all, as important as the tourist industry is, you know what industry is even more important in the state of Vermont that we're not adequately funding? And that is agriculture. I think I'm the only candidate up here who believes that the family farm is viable, it is not obsolete, and that we've got to fight like hell to maintain the family farm. Between you and me, frankly, would I rather see money go into agriculture so that we can have honest, hard-working farmers continue the 200-year tradition of this state? Would I rather give the money to the ski industry? I'd rather give it to the farmers.
Governor Madeleine Kunin.
Well, I would argue that the mayor is the only candidate who has fought for the farmer. We have very strongly fought for the farmer, and in fact provided a very sound program in terms of tax relief by the current use tax program, which allows a farmer to have his or her land evaluated at its use rather than its fair market value. But I think the question was about tourism. They are interrelated in the sense that a lot of people come to Vermont because of the beauty of our open spaces and our farmland. And I guess this isn't quite cricket, but I'd like to use this opportunity to encourage anybody who's listening to think of Vermont as a place to actually see that for themselves. But as far as advertising for the state, I believe that it should be on a matching basis, that when the state promotes advertising to some degree, the private sector should share in that expenditure. But I also note with interest that the lieutenant governor, who constantly talks about how he would cut the budget, is very quick to increase the budget whenever a particular group makes a request, such as the tourism sector.
Perhaps?
Okay,
Well, I think I'd get
Lieutenant
the
Governor, very quickly.
The fact of the matter is that I gave the rationale, and it makes excellent business sense. If we can spend a little bit more money and raise 5 or 6 times as much, and those are standard figures, then in fact, especially when you look at the times we're going into, where I think it's going to be tougher to come by state revenues because we've spent our way into a hole in this state, that kind of a little investment makes some sense. The other thing I got to tell you is when I talk to farmers and I talk to members of the travel industry, they know they need each other. They know it. And they say, where'd the fight come from? Farmer told me the other day, I need these people to come to Vermont. And the travel industry people know that. The fact of the matter is the mayor nor the governor owns love of agriculture. We've got a proposal, and it addresses 2 major things. One, how do you help farmers reduce the cost of doing business? And the other is, how do you help farmers develop new products and market the products they've got? We've had trouble, frankly, in the marketing program, and we think we can do something about it that won't cost a whole lot of new money.
There's a Vermont voter waiting on the line, but Mayor Sanders, go ahead.
10 seconds went on a little bit longer. I think it must be this thing in my ear again, but I thought I heard the governor say, we fought to bring about tax reform for the farmers. Actually,
That's correct.
Gee, I must have missed the boat on this. I thought you were opposed to it for the entire session of the legislature and just came into support of it at the very end of the legislature. In fact, I'm quite certain of that. In fact, I'm quite certain that it was Anthony Polina and the people working for the Fair Tax Initiative, of which I was involved in, who said that the farmers of the state of Vermont need property tax relief. If my memory is right, you did not support that until the very end of the legislature when we developed the momentum to bring it into effect. That's what my memory is. Maybe my earplug is doing me misjustice.
Governor Kunin with a Vermont voter waiting, go ahead.
I don't want to keep that Vermont voter waiting, but before you were mayor, Bernie, I was chairman of the Appropriations Committee when we enacted that law, and I've been strongly supportive of that ever since. We opened up the current use program. We've held hearings throughout the state. We're going to triple the amount of money in that program, and that's the greatest assistance for the short time that we can give the Vermont farmer.
Not when you were in the legislature, but when you were governor is really what we're talking about.
Whenever
Both times.
Whenever C-SPAN travels on the road like this, there's a lot of people that help us out. We're operating on strange turf, and a lot of people help us out, and it's the only way we can do that. I'd like to thank Mr. Ed Weed, Director of Engineering and Supervisor of the Buildings and Grounds for the state for helping us, and also Green Mountain Cable for their assistance in helping us pull this off here in Montpelier, Vermont. Let's go to that voter, Norwich. You're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to call. I wanted to ask the three candidates what their positions would be are on ensuring the fair access to the home satellite viewers like myself who are numerous in the state of Vermont to see that we can continue to see this program and all the other programming that hasn't been available to us until the advent of satellite, and what your positions would be in seeing that this right is ensured in the future. And I think, it's one of the wonders of satellite technology that this program tonight is taking place, and that callers from Vermont and Florida and the Virgin Islands and California could all get together and discuss this. And it's an issue that's certainly in front of the Congress, but political pressure from the state level and is certainly of interest to me, and I'm sure many Vermonters as well as many of the viewers tonight. So I'd be interested in hearing your opinions, and I'll be hanging up.
Norwich, before you go, let me ask you, are there a lot of home dish owners in this state?
They're all over the place. I'm sure the three candidates know there was some legislation in front of the Vermont House this past year regarding home dish placement, and luckily that was either thrown out or defeated. But yeah, the dishes really are linked to the outside world up here in Vermont.
Okay, thanks for the call. Governor Kunin, why don't you start?
Well, the caller is right in that being a rural state, we're very dependent on this kind of interconnection and telecommunications. But I believe that the kind of action that you're calling for will have to be determined at the federal level. On the state level, I have formed a telecommunications commission that is including all of the actors involved in order to make sure that for the future, Vermont has the kind of telecommunication linkages that keep it contemporary. I mean, these are the highways of our times. And we will be making proposals in that regard to strengthen our telecommunications system. As far as the individual satellites, I'd be happy to get more information on exactly what you would recommend in that regard, and work with a congressional delegation to see that that happens.
Mayor Sanders?
I always think I have an answer to a question. I think I don't have a good answer to this question. I just don't know all that much about it, but I would say this. Television is an extraordinarily powerful medium. And one of the very serious problems that exist in this country today is that you have major networks owned by very, very wealthy people who fill the airways with junk and commercials. And in fact, as a result of that, people very often don't have an understanding of what's happening in their society. One of the things that we did in Burlington that I'm very proud of is we had a cable television system in Burlington that was inadequate, that was not relating well to the consumers, and we said to them, you know what, we're going to take it over. The city of Burlington is going to have a municipal system. Well, it turned out we didn't have to go that way because we found, and you mentioned the name of that system, Green Mountain Cable, came into Burlington, and we now have a very fine public access system in Burlington. We now have an expanded system which allows the people in Burlington to watch this program today, and a year ago they would not have been allowed to do it. I am very excited about the idea of opening up the airwaves to the people to allow good discussions to take place, allow local programming. Tonight in Burlington, the Board of Aldermen meeting is being televised. So I think opening up the airwaves to the people, allowing people to get on the airwaves, to communicate with each other, is an extremely important development, which I support.
Lieutenant Governor Smith.
I've got to make two comments. First of all, going back to the last question, it wasn't Anthony Polina, and it wasn't Governor Kunin. It was Francis Horrigan, who's a Democrat and a state senator and a farmer from Franklin County. And if it wasn't for him, there wouldn't have been any bill last year. That's the man who deserves the credit. Now, in terms of your question about dishes, I'm with the mayor, and I suspect we're both with the governor. We don't quite know enough about what your question is to answer it substantively. I will, within 3 to 4 weeks, be publishing a study on technology precisely based on the idea that as where the railroads and as where the interstates in this state went, and you have the examples of history, where in fact we have the electronic highways, that's where affluence, that's where jobs, that's where good education is going to go. And any county, any town, any child, any school that's off those electronic highways is going to be getting a second-rate shot. So we're going to have a study. We've been raised $50,000 from the private sector. We've had a team of experts traveling to other states. We're going to have a comprehensive proposal, and it isn't going to be publicly funded. It's going to be a very innovative one. But the goal is to make sure that people aren't deprived the opportunities of the age that is with us, whether they're satellite owners or whether they, in fact, need a fiber optic wire. Over the long haul, those people are going to be able to tap in. That's going to be good economic news, good cultural news, good civic news for every man, woman, and child in the state.
West Palm Beach, Florida, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question to Mayor Sanders. I wanted to ask him, stepping back from the campaign a little bit and looking at the other two candidates objectively, doesn't he think that his candidacy is directly hurting Madeleine Kunin, and that people who vote for him would normally be her supporters, and doesn't he see her as the lesser of the two evils, and how would he feel about contributing to her demise?
Governor, how does it feel to be the lesser of two evils? I think that's really what this campaign is about. What we have done in Burlington, Vermont, is of national significance, and that's exactly what I want to see happen in the state of Vermont. What we have done is brought together a coalition of working people and elderly people and independent-minded people who had the courage to break with the Democratic and Republican Party. As a result of that fact, we have come close to doubling the number of people who vote in Burlington elections. We have far more people participating in the civic life of our community. We've brought forth significant breakthroughs in tax reform, housing, women's rights, youth programs, cultural activities, etc., etc. What has got to happen here in the state of Vermont, and this is my dream, and I'm very, I feel this very strongly, is I am concerned about what's going on in this country. I am concerned about the fact that essentially, deep down, the Democratic and Republican parties are essentially alike. That on the national level, that on the state level, basically neither of those parties is standing up, representing working people, representing poor people, making the fight that has to be made against the absurd national priorities today that are leading us to a nuclear war at the same exact time we're cutting back on programs for poor people, for the elderly, and in education. We need a revitalization of politics in the state of Vermont. Tomorrow there's a primary election here in Vermont for the Democratic and Republican parties. My guess is that about 20% of the people who are eligible to vote will come out and vote. People are disgusted with status quo politics. The answer is not whether Governor Kunin is better or worse than Peter Smith. I've known both of them for years. I like both of them. They're honest, intelligent people. The question is whether in the state of Vermont we're going to bring together the environmentalists, the vast majority of our people, the working people, the elderly people, the farmers, to begin to stand together to fight for a decent life for all of our people. It's not going to be led by Governor Kunin, and it is not going to be led by Mr. Smith. We need to break from the two-party system, and I'm very excited that we are going to do something in Vermont. We are going to do something in Vermont that has never been done in our history, and that is elect an independent governor of the state of Vermont, and we're going to do something that has not been done in 50 years in the United States of America. Elect an independent governor outside of the Democratic and Republican parties who is a progressive, who is prepared to take on the establishment and the big money interests.
I'm sorry, we have 2 minutes left, and I'll give a minute to the governor, and then I'll give a minute to the lieutenant governor.
Thank you. I think we have to really make one very strong point here, and that is there is a real distinction between me as a Democratic governor and my Republican opponent. We have produced results in what frankly is an extraordinary period of time. We have brought a new vitality to this state in a way that perhaps the mayor doesn't understand. One is that we have involved women in public life in a way that they aren't involved in any other state in the country. And not simply because they're women, but because they're outstanding people in my administration. We've retired the deficit. We've put Vermont again in the forefront as a strong and a proud environmental state. And that is a major achievement. And we've been fiscally responsible while we've been socially humane. And it's that kind of distinction that I think distinguishes me from my Republican opponent. I'm not afraid to retire the deficit and to spend money where I think it counts in education and in making people independent.
60 seconds left.
I think it's fair to say that the campaign has begun, and I want to congratulate the governor for being here, and I'm delighted that she's agreed to 27 other forums and debates, because this is exactly the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about. Now, I have to tell you, caller from West Palm Beach, I'm going to have to tell you that I don't think Bernie Sanders helps the governor. I think hurts the governor. I think Bernie Sanders hurts me. Honest to God, all the smart people see it the other way. I happen to think he hurts me. I don't know what that'll tell you. And I got to tell you something else. When you look at these three people sitting in front of you tonight, there's only one of us who dedicated almost 10 years of his life to helping working people in a hands-on way, and that was Peter Smith. What did we do? We started the Community College of Vermont, and today, thousands, second largest college in the state of Vermont, thousands of working men and women can go to school as part-time students and improve their lives because I and a number of other gifted men and many women put in the time and the sweat and took a risk to create a college system that is still today unique in the United States of America, and I'm proud of it.
Lieutenant Governor Smith, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Mayor Bernard Sanders of Burlington very much.
It's over already, we just began.
We've spent an hour and a half of time, believe it or not, Lieutenant Governor Smith and also Governor Madeleine Kunin. If you've enjoyed our programming from Burlington, Vermont, from Montpelier, excuse me very much. The person you have to thank is Susan Bundock, who set it all up and made all the phone calls and put an awful lot of work into it, and she did an excellent job. She deserves a great deal of credit. Also, in charge of Master Control and Director for all of our programs, Brett Betzel. In charge of the field crews was Greg Gursky, and the Chief Engineer, Richard Fleecing. They all did an excellent job. I'd like to thank them. I'd also like to thank the people of Montpelier for being so kind to us. If you've been watching us and have been calling, we appreciate it. Have a nice evening.
So is Ben and Jerry's. And we can't forget Mayor Bernie.